You know that feeling when you are reading a story and you realize halfway through that everything you thought you understood about it was wrong? That the character you thought was ordinary is not ordinary? That the world you thought you understood has a layer underneath it that changes every single thing about what you were looking at? That feeling is going to happen to you in this story, and I need you to be ready for it. So here is what I want you to do right now. Before the first word of this story, I want you to make a prediction in the comments. Right now, write down what you think Sabel is, what you think her wolf form looks like, what you think the Alpha King is so afraid of. Write it down, because at the end of this story, you are going to come back to that comment and you are going to find out whether you were right. And I promise you, you are not going to be right. Nobody ever is. Subscribe so you are here for the reveal. Hit like so more people get the chance to make their prediction. And share this with one person who loves being wrong about stories in the best possible way. Comment your prediction. Subscribe, like, share. Now, let us find out what Sabel is. The pressure started 3 days before the shift. Not pain. Sabel had been expecting pain, had been told by the pack's older wolves in the overheard conversation she was not supposed to be part of that the pre-shift pressure was pain, was the wolf, pushing against the inside of a body that had not yet learned to accommodate it. What she felt was not that. What she felt was closer to what happens when you have been holding a door shut against something enormous for a very long time and your arms are finally, after years of holding, beginning to shake. Not the thing on the other side of the door. The holding. The holding was what was failing. The effort of containing something she had not known she was containing. She had been classified as formless since her first marking ceremony at 15, passed over again at 17, finally and permanently at 19. The pack's hierarchy closing the file on her with the specific administrative efficiency of a system that has a protocol for wolves. It cannot categorize and applies the protocol without cruelty and without particular attention, because the protocol is the point, not the wolf. The protocol said, formless wolf, 3rd tier, East Village, no further assessment required. She had believed the protocol. For 5 years she had believed it. On the 3rd day of the pressure, she stopped believing it. She ran east at 11:43 on an October Thursday, past the meeting hall, past the locked eastern gate into the Greywood forest with the specific desperate purposefulness of someone who has run out of every other option for managing what is happening inside them. The Greywood received her, not warmly, not with the specific welcome of a territory embracing a wolf it recognizes. The forest simply was. 300 years of old-growth oak and ash, trunks wider than door frames, canopy so dense the sky disappeared and the only light was the ambient silver of the full moon, diffused through the leaves into something softer and stranger. The forest did not care about the pack's locked gate. The forest had been here before the gate and would be here after it and had no particular investment in its authority. She ran for 12 minutes. Then her legs stopped. Not her decision, her wolf's. The thing she had been told she did not have making its first unilateral decision, which was that this, here, now, this specific clearing in the old-growth interior where the full moon came through a gap in the canopy and fell on the forest floor in a circle of cold silver light. This was the place. She had time to understand what was coming. She had time to put both hands flat on the cold forest floor. Then her wolf took her apart and put her back together as something else. The transformation was nothing like the accounts she had overheard. The older wolves described it as pain, the specific breaking and reforming pain of a body that does not yet know how to be two things. What Sabel felt was not pain. What Sabel felt was release. The specific enormous release of something that had been held under pressure for 23 years, finally finding the form it had been trying to reach since before she was born. Her bones did not break, they remembered. Her muscles did not tear. They expanded into what they had always been contracted away from. Her spine did not crack, it extended, with the specific relief of something that has been slightly wrong for decades and is being made correct. The shift took 4 minutes. She knew this because she was conscious for all of it. Fully present, fully aware, the wolf not consuming her mind but joining it. The specific integration of two things that were always meant to be one thing finally becoming one thing. She felt every second. She felt her jaw extend, and her hands become paws and her shoulders widen to a breadth that should not have been possible given the body she had started with. She felt her senses reorganize, the forest's smell arriving in layers of information that her human nose had never had access to. 3 days of territorial markings on the trees readable as clearly. As text, the deer 200 meters north. The groundwater 8 feet down, the specific ancient smell of the forest's soil that carried 300 years of wolf history in its composition. She felt her coat come in, silver white, not gray, not pale. Silver white in the way of moonlight on still water, a color that had a quality to it that was not entirely explained by the moon above, and not entirely natural in any framework the pack's hierarchy used to classify wolf forms. She stood 4 feet at the shoulder. She knew what 4 feet at the shoulder meant in the Ironwood Pack's ranked hierarchy, knew it the way you know things you have filed carefully, because they describe a category you were told you would never occupy. 4 feet at the shoulder was the Alpha's measure, was the specific size that the Pack's marking system associated with the highest tier of wolf bloodline strength, was the size that produced immediate automatic deference in ranked wolves below it because the Pack's biology responded to it before the Pack's wolves had the chance to decide whether deference was appropriate. She was 4 feet at the shoulder, classified formless, 3rd tier, East Village. 4 feet at the shoulder, she lifted her head and breathed the Greywood and felt the forest's 300-year history in the air and in the ground under her paws, and in the specific quality of the full moon's light on her silver-white coat. Then she ran, because she had a wolf that had been waiting 23 years to run, and the Greywood was vast and old and entirely indifferent to the Pack's protocols about who was allowed to be what. She ran for 20 minutes, deeper than the Pack's patrols, deeper than the Pack's territorial markers, into the ancient interior that the Pack's records classified as unclaimed and that the Pack's wolves stayed out of, for reasons none of them had ever fully articulated, but all of them instinctively understood. She ran until the forest changed, the air different, heavier with age, the trees older, the ground beneath her paws carrying a different quality of history. She stopped because the forest told her to, not in language, in the specific way that a territory that has been wolf-claimed for 3 centuries communicates with a wolf whose blood it recognizes. A shift in the air pressure, a change in the quality of the silence, the specific full-body awareness of something becoming aware of her from a direction she had not been watching. She lifted her head, and she smelled him before she saw him. Alpha musk, territorial dominance markers, the specific chemical signature of a wolf who has been in this forest many times and has stopped trying to hide the fact of his visits. Alpha King Kale of the Ironwood Pack stepped out of the shadow of 2 ancient oaks at the clearing's edge. He was in his wolf form, dark gray, almost black in the forest's deep shadow, the Alpha's color, the specific coat that the Ironwood Pack's bloodline produced at its highest tier. Enormous, 4 feet at the shoulder, the Alpha's measure. His eyes pale amber in the full moon's light, catching it in the specific way of a wolf who has been in this forest enough times at night that the darkness is comfortable rather than disorienting. He stopped at the clearing's edge. His pale amber eyes found her. She watched him conduct the assessment, the systematic alpha scan of an unknown wolf in his territory, the specific reading of size, coat, eyes, posture that the Pack's instinctual hierarchy required. She watched his eyes move across her silver-white coat. She watched them register the 4-foot shoulder height. She watched them find her silver eyes and hold. His assessment stopped, not because he had completed it, because what he was looking at had broken the assessment's framework. She held his gaze. He shifted back to human form. The Alpha's shift, which was faster and cleaner than a first-timer's, the body knowing exactly what it was doing. He was 31 years old, dark-haired, with the specific physical quality of someone built by years of being the largest thing in most rooms. Broad-shouldered, grounded, the posture of a man who has never had to assert his presence, because his presence has always been sufficient. She shifted back, which was the second surprise of the night. The return shift as easy as exhaling, her wolf releasing her back to human form with the practiced ease of something that has done this 10,000 times, rather than twice. She stood across the clearing from him in her human body, and the moon was above them, and the ancient forest was around them, and 10 feet of old-growth forest floor was between them. Formless, he said, looking at her. His voice was even, precise, the voice of someone choosing every word. That is what the protocol says, she said. I know what the protocol says. A pause. I wrote the last revision of the protocol. Another pause, 4 feet at the shoulder. Yes, she said. Silver coat. His pale amber eyes were on her face. Silver eyes. Yes, she said. He was quiet for a moment that had calculations in it. You need to come with me, he said. Where, she said. The archive, he said. There is something you need to read. She looked at him across the clearing. You are not afraid of me, she said. Not the question she meant to ask. The question her wolf asked, bypassing her mind's more careful assessment. He held her gaze. "I am afraid of what is going to happen to you," he said, "when the elders find out." The archive beneath the meeting hall was not what she expected. She had known the archive existed. Everyone in the pack knew the archive existed. She had not known the restricted section existed, had not known that beneath the public records of pack history and territorial surveys and marking ceremony documentation, there was a deeper section accessed by a separate stair behind a door that looked like wall paneling and that required alpha-level biometric confirmation to open. The specific biological lock of wolf territory architecture, responding to Kale's alpha presence the way old territory responded to its current alpha, recognizing and yielding. She followed him down. The restricted archive was stone walls and old timber shelves, and the smell of documents that had been sitting in cool, dry air for long enough that the paper had become part of the atmosphere of the room. He went directly to the oldest section without hesitation, the familiarity of someone who had been here many times looking for the same thing. He found the document, set it on the reading table. "Step back, read it," he said. She read it. The document was 300 years old and written in the original Ironwood pack language, the pre-standardization form that the current pack scholars could translate but no longer spoke natively. A founding record, the original bloodlines, the original structure, the specific wolves the pack had been built around before the current hierarchy's redesign a century ago, and a section that had no direct modern equivalent. A description of a bloodline the original pack had organized itself around that the current pack had no record of. A bloodline whose wolves shifted silver-white with silver eyes, whose wolf form exceeded the standard correlation between bloodline tier and physical size, whose capabilities the document described in terms that required the margin translator's note. Approximate only. Original language carries connotations not fully captured in modern pack vocabulary. The word the document used was in the old language. The margin note rendered it, the Undying. She read the description of what the Undying bloodline wolf could do. She read it twice. Then she looked up. Kale was watching her with the expression she had learned to read in the 40 minutes she had known him. The alarm that was not fear of her but fear for her, and underneath it something else she was not yet ready to name. "They cannot be killed," she said. "Not by conventional means," he said. "Not by another wolf. Not by the pack's standard enforcement mechanisms. The document is specific about this, and there are 3 case records in the back of this section from the past century where the elders tried." A pause. "It did not work. So they contained them," she said. "They offered a choice," he said. "Serve the hierarchy as an asset or be confined in the deep Greywood indefinitely." His voice was careful and controlled, and the care and the control were doing significant work. In all 3 cases, the wolf chose confinement over service. The document notes this without apparent understanding of why. She understood why. Service to the hierarchy meant service to the system that had spent a century erasing her bloodline's existence from the official record. Not because the bloodline had died out, but because the bloodline made the hierarchy's control mechanisms optional. Wolves who could not be killed, whose form exceeded the ranking system's categories, whose existence reminded the pack that the marking system and the territorial hierarchy were constructions rather than facts. These wolves were not dangerous to the pack. They were dangerous to the pack's management by people who needed the pack to believe the constructions were facts. "The standing order," she said. "Any wolf displaying the silver form, report immediately to the council," he said. "Yes." "You found this document 8 months ago," she said. "Yes." "And you did not report it?" "No." She looked at him across the archive table. "Why?" she said. He held her gaze with the pale amber eyes that had been the first thing she had noticed about him in the clearing. The eyes of an alpha who had spent 5 years on a throne built on an architecture he had been investigating for 8 months and had found insufficient. "Because the order is wrong," he said. "Because a hierarchy that responds to wolves it cannot control by containing them rather than understanding them is a hierarchy that has confused its own authority with the pack's well-being." He paused. "And because the document is clear about something the elders have been deliberately unclear about for a century." He looked at her steadily. The Undying bloodline was not a threat to the original pack. It was the function the original pack was organized around. The founding wolves built their territory around a wolf like you. Not to manage her, to follow her. The current hierarchy did not replace a dangerous element. It replaced the pack's original center with itself. The archive was very still around them. She thought about 3 marking ceremonies. About the protocol, formless wolf, 3rd tier, East Village, no further assessment required. About 5 years of believing the protocol, because the protocol was all she had been given. And absence of evidence looks like evidence of absence when you have never been given access to the evidence. The evidence was in this room. It had been in this room for a century. The elders will know by morning, she said. Someone will have seen me leave through the gate. Yes, he said. They will come here. They are probably already coming, he said. She stood. She looked at the document one final time. The old language word, the margin translation, 300 years of a bloodline, waiting for a wolf who would read it and understand. Then we should not be underground, she said. He stood. They went up the stairs together. The Alpha King, who had kept a secret for 8 months because the order was wrong, and the wolf the hierarchy had spent a century making invisible because invisible, was the only management strategy available for something that could not be eliminated. And they came up through the meeting hall and out through the main doors into the cold October night. The square was empty. The full moon was directly above, high and cold and silver, the specific moon of a night that has decided to be significant. She felt it before she heard it. The pack bond, the specific biological connection that linked every wolf in Ironwood territory to every other wolf. The thing that the hierarchy maintained through the ranking system and the territorial markers and the marking ceremonies. The invisible architecture of how a wolf pack remained a pack, rather than simply a collection of wolves in the same place. She felt it the way you feel a current in water, not with a specific sense, with your whole body simultaneously. The specific awareness of something moving through a medium that you are also moving. Through her wolf was in her blood, fully awake, fully present. And the pack bond was responding to it the way old architecture responds to a frequency it was built to receive. Resonating, recognizing the specific shiver of something that has been waiting for a signal and has just received it. Around her, from the houses, from the patrol positions at the territory's edge, from the deep Greywood where the off-duty warriors rested between shifts, she heard the pack begin to howl. 1 wolf, then 3, then a dozen, then every wolf in Ironwood territory simultaneously, the full pack howl that the hierarchy reserved for specific ceremonial occasions, and that the pack's biology had just produced without ceremony, without authorization, without the hierarchy's permission. The pack was howling because something in its bond had just woken up, something it recognized. Something it had been told did not exist. Kale stood beside her. Not in front, not behind. Beside the specific positioning of someone who has made a decision and is making it visible. She heard the elders coming. Their boots on the cobblestones of the streets between the East Quarter buildings. Their voices low and urgent. The specific quality of people who have felt what just happened in the pack bond and are moving toward its source with the authority of people who have managed such sources before and have a protocol for it. She shifted, silver white in the full moon's light, 4 feet at the shoulder, eyes the color of old things that have absorbed the world's light for long enough to make it their own. The elders came around the corner of the meeting hall and into the square and stopped. 5 of them, senior council, the people who had written the protocol that had classified her at 15 and 17 and 19. The people who had the standing order, the people who had the 3 case records from the past century and knew what they meant, and had been managing the knowledge for a century with the specific institutional diligence of people who understand that knowledge is power and have decided who should have it. They looked at her. She looked back. The pack was still howling around them, every wolf in the territory, the sound coming from every direction simultaneously. The pack bond doing something the hierarchy had not authorized and could not stop. The eldest elder, a woman of 70 years with the specific quality of someone who has exercised authority for so long it had become her resting posture, looked at Sabel's wolf form with the expression of someone encountering something they prepared for and finding the preparation insufficient. Then she looked at Kale. You knew, she said. 8 months, he said. His voice was entirely steady. You have a responsibility to the pack, he said. Yes, I do. He held the elder's gaze with the pale amber eyes that had never looked away from anything in 5 years of ruling a territory built on a foundation he had found cracked. That is exactly why I am standing here. The elder looked back at Sabel. Sabel met her eyes. The elder's expression did the thing that expressions do when a person has been certain of a thing for a very long time and is standing in front of the evidence that their certainty was not the same. as the truth. It did not collapse, did not shatter, simply at the deepest level available to a face, the level where the architecture of a belief lives rather than its surface. The howling around them did not stop. The pack was remembering something. The pack was remembering what it had been before someone decided to make it forget. Sabel stood in the silver moonlight of the Ironwood Territory's central square, and she was 4 feet at the shoulder, and her eyes were silver, and the full pack was howling her bloodline back into existence with the specific unstoppable momentum of a truth that has been suppressed for a century and has just found the surface. The elders had a protocol. The protocol was for a wolf who did not know what she was. She knew what she was. She was the wolf the pack had been built around. She was the thing the hierarchy had spent a century making the pack forget. She was undying, and she was not going anywhere. Stop right here. Because what Kale just said, that is everything. 8 months of knowing. 8 months of standing inside a system he was supposed to uphold and choosing not to. Not because he was weak, because he understood the difference between the hierarchy's authority and the pack's well-being. And he chose the pack. While this is sitting in your chest, hit the like button right now. 1 tap. If Kale choosing the pack over the hierarchy moved you, if the 8 months moved you, tap like. And share this video right now. Open your messages and find one person, one specific person, and send them the link. Right, you need to hear what Kale says. They will understand when they get there. Subscribe if you are not subscribed, because the sequel is coming, and the sequel starts the moment this video ends. Like, share, subscribe. Now, let us finish this. Close your eyes for 1 second. I mean it. Close them. Think about the last time someone told you that you were not enough, that you did not have what it takes, that the system looked at you and decided you were not worth the category. Now open them, because that is what this story is actually about. Not wolves, not transformation, not silver coats and ancient bloodlines and alpha kings standing in archives with documents that change everything. It is about what happens when the thing they told you was nothing turns out to be the most powerful thing in the room. And the thing it always was. Now I need you to do something different from anything I have asked before. Go to the comments and write 1 word. The word that describes what you felt when Sabel shifted in the square and the entire pack started howling. 1 word. Whatever it is. Whatever the ending did to you. Write it, because I read every single comment. And the word you write is going to determine what part 2 becomes. The direction this story takes next is going to be built from what your comments tell me you need. Your word is the story's next chapter. Write it now, and go back to your prediction comment, the one you wrote before the story started. Read what you predicted, then write underneath it, I was wrong, or I was right. Let me know which one, because I want to know whether anyone saw this coming. Nobody ever does. Subscribe, like, share, write your word. I will read every single one. I will see you in the dark.